Welcome back to the Wondering Podcast. I'm Leah Wilson, and today I'm joined by Jared Sessler, running for Washington's 4th Congressional District, which is one of the most agriculture-rich regions in the country, which makes it an interesting race. And through vetting and endorsing Jared's race, it has become clear that he has a great understanding of the depth of the mission to restore health freedom to Americans. So thank you so much, Jared, for joining me today. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. Thanks for having me. I've a pretty amazing story.
Absolutely. And before we jump into policy and the battles ahead, I would love for you to share part of that personal story that really shapes how you see health freedom. So, would you be willing to share about your terminal cancer diagnosis and treatment path that you chose and what that means to you today? What
Yeah,
were you told when given that diagnosis?
yeah. So I'm 56 now, and back when I was 29, I was driving race cars and working as an engineer, and I had a habit of backing up to the corner of walls and scratching my back because I had this itchy spot, and it turned out to be a uh, irregular shaped, discolored, itchy mole, which is a telltale sign for melanoma cancer. And ended up getting into a dermatologist, and long story short, they gave me a stage 4 metastasized melanoma diagnosis, which is basically an advanced stage melanoma cancer. They gave me about a 5% chance of living, and that was, now 26, almost 26 years ago. And I did not do conventional medical treatment, as they we certainly did a lot of the tests and things to figure out, what was going on. We even did a sentinel node biopsy, and and an excision around the mole to remove it off and get that analyzed at Bethesda, and all these different things. But when it came down to treatment, I just felt like, and really, I believe God kind of intervened at that time and introduced me to some folks who really, I feel like, more clearly understand what the source of a lot of our sickness or dishealth or disease. It's funny, disease, if you separate the syllables, it's disease where it comes from. And so I chose to basically go on a natural path, and I made some radical diet changes, lost about 40 pounds in the first 3 months, which was crazy. But, that was kind of the path that I took. And I will say that, there's a whole lot of different aspects of it that I could go into here, in terms of what we did and how we found the path. But one of the biggest things that I realized fairly quickly was that I was a laboratory of one. And every time I ate or drank or did something, or, breathed something or saw something or heard something, it was, okay, how does that go into my body, into my person, and how does it affect me, and how do I feel afterwards? And you start to analyze how things are affecting you. Where the challenge and the rub often comes is when you have a lot of habits or things that you loved from your past or childhood or different things like that, that mean a lot to you, and you find out, wow, those are really not good for me, and I probably shouldn't keep doing that, based on what my body's telling me, when I do it. So anyway, that's kind of the general overview. I guess I could also add, the primary thing that we did was we started eating a lot of fresh agricultural products, in their natural state, sort of the one ingredient foods. And even to this day, I will say that my biggest challenge to people, if they want to experience better health, is to eat more single ingredient foods in their raw, fresh, organic state. It doesn't mean you can't have other stuff, and that sort of thing. But I think that a lot of the packaged and processed foods and chemicals and God only knows what they're putting in this stuff, is one of the biggest factors that harms us. So that's kind of the general overview. There's one other quick thing I could share if you want to learn more about, or if you want me to share more about some of my personal journey and some of the stuff I've learned, which I'm happy to do. Or if you have questions, I can answer them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you say single ingredient foods. I'm always telling my kids, like, eat whole foods. But maybe if I change that to single ingredients, they'll quit,
Yeah,
you know, bucking
yeah,
me on having the apple and the
yeah.
peanut butter. or their after school snack.
The big yeah, the big thing with kids is you have to cut it up. And really it's humans. You shouldn't even say kids, you know. If you cut it up, if you prepare it, like for example, if your kids have friends over and you put out a bowl of apples, they're just whole apples. Every single one of them will still be there when the kids leave. But if they have all their friends over and you take a dozen apples and you chop them up real quick, which is very simple to do, they'll all be gone in 15 minutes.
I love that. I love that. What options were presented to you after diagnosis? I mean, wow, to be told you have 5% chance of
Yeah.
survival. And so what were the mainstream options or the options from your doctor, and
Yeah,
why didn't you take
yeah, I
that
have to
option?
remember this was 26 years ago. So this was way back 1999, and the primary options that we had were chemotherapy, interferon, or what they called monitoring. It seems like there was a fourth one too, but I don't remember what it was. But those were basically it. Chemotherapy, we know a lot about that. It's got a lot of history. Interferon, we never heard of it prior to this. But basically, they said, the symptoms for me was that I would basically be sick for like two years, and I'd never be able to drive race cars again, and we would never be able to have kids because it would basically make me sterile and all this kind of stuff. And so, that those were motivating factors to say, maybe I could change my diet and see if that, does anything. So that's ended up being sort of the route that we took.
Whose idea was it to change your diet? Was it your doctor's? Was it yours? Just Holy Spirit guidance? I mean, what did that look like?
Yeah, I truly believe it was God's guidance. My aunt and uncle introduced us to an organization called Hallelujah Acres. And there's a guy that founded that named Dr. George Malcolmus. And just a great organization. And they teach basically like a 85% raw, 15% cooked, fundamentalist Genesis 129. It's a great starting point. I feel like I've learned a ton from them. I've known, and I still know a lot of people from that organization. Um, and I appreciate a lot of the stuff that they do because they also continue their studies, and they will make changes and say, well, we weren't quite right on this, and maybe we should try that. And because I'll just give you an example. Like I continued to have skin problems, which I had skin cancer, and so skin problems are a big deal. But for probably 10 years after, even though I was eating very healthy, supposedly, I was doing all this stuff, eating lots of good stuff, but I still had like almost like it wasn't eczema, but it was like dry skin spots and things on my arms and different, it wasn't like horrible, but it was not right. And you think, you look like a perfect complexion. I've never necessarily been that way, but you'd think, if you eat good, your skin should be healthy, right? Your skin is an organ. And what we found out is that we were missing some key ingredients. And when we eat a lot of omega-6 in the American diet, and you have to have omega-3s to process that in your body, and that combination is what allows them to process through. Well, we tried some different things. We actually did a series of studies over a year period, and we did blood tests in between to see, because we knew it was my omega-3s were low. And so we tried a plant-based omega-3. We actually tried two different ones, and the results were mediocre. And one in particular, it was actually worse after 3 months of doing it. And then we did fish oil for 3 months, and it was like the chart was like this. It just took a huge upswing, and my skin cleared up within, I ever since then, I've had no problems. And so prior to that, we weren't eating really hardly any animal products or seafood or anything like that during this time. And then after that, it's kind of when we started expanding more, realizing that the bigger problems were probably packaged foods more so than anything else. And another example is like dairy. We've found out through the years, like raw milk doesn't have any negative effect on me. I can drink it and feel fine. I don't feel plugged up. But if I get this highly processed stuff and I drink it, it's like you eat ice cream that's from sort of the standard ingredients and stuff. You don't feel as good. But if you make the stuff natural, you feel fine. And it's like, oh, wait a second. Maybe it's the processing. Maybe it's the ingredients. Maybe it's all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
That is amazing talking about the processing because, so many people have gluten sensitivities, which is a real thing.
Hmm.
But part of the gluten sensitivity often comes down to the processing. You start milling your own flour at home and not damaging those proteins and B vitamins, and you synthesize it totally differently in your body. And it's a powerful thing.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. Yeah.
and you mentioned that there's other things that you could share with the audience. I think it's a hot topic. Your own experience with your health journey and cancer. I mean, I was just the episode prior to this what had to do with the cancer story. And actually my next episode does too. And there's so many people affected by not only the devastation of a diagnosis, but then navigating the healing
Yeah.
journey.
Well, I'm happy to talk to anybody. I still to this day, I get lots of questions and people reaching out to me. Um, because my story is so unique. I don't know of anybody else who has survived stage 4 metastasized melanoma, especially not for the length of time that I have. Maybe today there's people who have, maybe heard stories like mine and others, but unfortunately the standard protocol doesn't really support, living through that kind of a diagnosis, unfortunately. And that's not a knock on any doctors or nurses. My mom's a nurse for 40 years. But there's a couple things. The one that comes to mind for me, for some reason right now, is this idea of like, where do all of our issues come from? Where do our diseases, where do our ailments, where does all this stuff come from? And I'm telling you, this is what I believe. I believe everything that we struggle with physically comes from either a toxicity or a deficiency. And part of the step of figuring out what's wrong with you and what it's going to take to get healing and health is figuring out whether or not it's a toxicity or it's a deficiency. And in old days, 50, 80, 100 years ago in America, we didn't have a lot of diseases of deficiency. We'd have more of those. Most of these diseases of deficiency were third world countries where they're not getting proper nutrients and things like that. We're actually seeing some more of that in America today, and you see it evidenced of the age of the kids. Now, when I was a kid, we didn't have any children's hospitals. Now we have children's hospitals in every single city in the country, and we have kids getting, terminal diagnoses at 2 and 3 and 4 or 5 years old, where that just wasn't the case back when I was a kid and younger. And so you have to ask yourself, well, what's changing? It's our lifestyle, it's our diet, it's the deficient diet that we have combined with the toxicity that we have. Now, I knew a guy who was diagnosed with cancer. He had his issue was toxicity, and he was like he had a jacuzzi jet tub, and he would get in it like 2 or 3 times a day. And he was doing everything else right. He was eating right. He was doing all this stuff, trying to get himself healed. And it turns out that there was black mold or something inside the pipes of this jet tub, and he was basically infecting, like re-toxifying himself multiple times a day, and he didn't even know it. Sometimes the air we breathe, we can't control. Sometimes, there's lights that are unhealthy. There's people that can be toxic to us. Life can be toxic. Politics can be toxic. There's lots of things. Having a distance between us and God can create toxicity. There's lots of things that can contribute to our ill health from a toxic side. And then deficiency is solved by eating lots of greens. If you were to put every food on a continuum, one end of the continuum being the most nutrient dense and the other one is the least nutrient dense, and go to the middle, so the middle to the top is all one color, it's all green. That's where the most nutrient dense stuff comes from. And so those are the things that we ought to be, eating a lot of. And it doesn't mean, we raise cattle, we love beef, we love fish. Halibut's one of my favorite, love salmon. We live in the Northwest. Um, the, there's lots of things that you can eat, but you need to really focus on having, these single ingredient type foods and just sort of be thinking about that in your mind, and trying to solve. If you're having issues, I'm just telling you, if you're having issues, no matter what it is, it's either from a deficiency or a toxicity, and you have to figure out which one it is. And let me just say one more thing, and it has to do with allergies. A lot of people think that allergies are a direct cause and effect when they're actually not. Usually what happens is people say, well, I have an allergy to peanuts or something like that, or I have an allergy to, seafood or something. It isn't so much the thing that is causing the reaction, it's the environment that we create within our bodies that is fostering and that result to happen. Similarly, there's still people running around. I literally just heard a commercial last week where they were talking about uh, skin cancer being caused by sun exposure and tanning beds and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, that is not true. The more sun that you get, natural sunlight, even in your eyes, you have 4 times the vitamin D production through your, I don't mean you want to look at the sun, but just having the sun indirectly going into your eyes, it creates vitamin D. Vitamin D is one of the most strongest natural cancer fighting things that your body creates naturally. And so it's not the sun exposure onto your skin that causes cancer. It's the environment that that sun is acting on. It's the things that you're eating and breathing and doing and reading and hearing and the people that you're around that's creating this body of existence that you have. And then these other things come and act on that and they react in a certain way. So hopefully that's helpful to some people out there.
Absolutely. So good. You kind of speak like a chiropractor. I think that your
Mm.
health philosophy is very vitalistic. I'll have
Yeah.
to send you a book. My husband and I, he's one of my co-hosts, Dr. Nick Wilson. We just wrote a book I think you would love talking
Uh,
about the root
we
cause
must
of
uh,
interference.
we must not have subluxation. We have to have our proper electrical system working in our body.
That's
Sure.
exactly right. And what is a
Yeah.
subluxation? Is it a thought, a trauma, or a toxin? And it's
Hmm.
so
Exactly.
good. And, Stand for Health Freedom endorses your race for US Congress in the 4th Congressional District of Washington. And you've already been in the fight on one of our issues that is most important to us right now. And that's the pesticide liability shield bills that are popping up across the country and in Congress. Why does this issue matter to you?
Well, I think, for me, when you hit at the heart of it, I am really not happy about the immunity that big pharma has. And we need to work on that to back that out. The last thing we need to do is be offering the same type of immunity to other industries, especially industries that are, you know, highly and directly affecting those single ingredient foods that I'm telling everyone are so important to eat. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's very important to me. And I don't think that any companies should have an immunity ring for products that they're making and selling to human beings. I just don't agree with that.
I mean, absolutely. It seems like the free market is so
Yeah.
integral to to transparency, to accountability, and how could this possibly be a solution? So what was your moment in time where you decided US Congress is my next office? Like this is where I'm called to serve. What was it that caused you to run?
Well, it actually started back in 2012 when Obama was reelected, and it was the point in time when I say it was politically numb for the first time because like most of the country, I think we celebrated in 2008 that the country elected our first black president. I thought that was good, and I think we all sort of felt like, oh, that's a good thing. But then we got into it, and we just saw his weak leadership style, especially the way he projected on national stage, and it was just appalling. Just the way we went through that period of years, and then for him to get reelected, and after we're thinking, okay, we 4 years of this, we're done uh, to get reelected and realize like, oh my goodness, and so here's what I think, Leah. I think that the majority of the people that we really want to run for political office are unwilling to put themselves out there to do it. They're busy, like I was, running my business, making money, raising a family, living life, traveling, doing the things that we love to do. And we sort of leave this whole political space up to the people that are willing to go. And no offense to people that are elected, because there are some good ones out there, but the majority of them are kind of mediocre at best. And they don't really have a lot of life experience outside of politics. I grew up in a really tough childhood. My mom was married 5 times. I was abused. I went to college. I went in the military, in the Navy, served on an aircraft carrier. Then I went to college, got 2 engineering degrees, worked in that industry for a few years, started a business, built that business into a national franchise concept. and raised a family, homeschooled, been married for to Nikki for 30 years this year. Uh, love building homes, love land development, got lots of tractors, cows, farm equipment. I've done it all. There's nothing that I haven't done. And I think we need more people that are not really excited about going, but are willing to do it. That to me, that's what this feels like. It feels like a different type of enlistment. When I enlisted in the military, I knew it was going to be good for me. I knew I was going to grow. I was going to get GI Bill money out of it. I was going to do it. With this, it's like, I, I'd probably be better off personally if I didn't do it, but I'm willing to do it for the people. I know that I have integrity. I know I'm going to make better decisions than a lot of these people. And maybe, I can have an influence on people that don't have as much experience to be able to, to lead better in public office. I totally disagree with these people who get elected and spend their entire lives in in Congress or just in elected positions. I just don't think that's. I'm excited to serve for a period of time and then come back and get back into business and enjoy my life. I don't want to spend my life in politics. What I've seen now over the last, few years. So I know I got on this kind of running off on a tangent here. I started supporting President Trump in 2016. There's still YouTube videos out there where I listed 5 things of why we needed to vote for him in 2016. And so that was 10 years ago now. And then 5 years ago, uh, w- you know, my congressman here in Central Washington voted to impeach him as a Republican. He's one of the 10. And that was the point. A couple months later, I stood up and I said, I'm going to run for Congress. And so I've been on this path for 5 years. I didn't make it through the primary the first time in 22, and then in 24, had Trump's endorsement, and we won the primary decisively. But in Washington state, it's a top 2 system. And so I had to go to the general election against the incumbent with the same party. And so, of course, all the Democrats are going to vote for him. And, and they spent millions of dollars lying about me and, just spreading these lies. And so we lost the general election. And so now, basically last 18 months, I've been doing work for, to help move America forward and to put plans together to rescue our beautiful state of Washington. And we're running again, and the incumbent has now announced his retirement because I think he knows he can't make it through another uh, primary. And so that's kind of the journey of how I got to where I'm at today.
So, how does it change your race that the incumbent is stepping down? What is this race going to look like this go around?
Well, it's interesting because his proxy is running. She announced a couple days after he announced his retirement. And so she's got the introductions to all the super PAC money, and her family's very wealthy. And they put in $1 million into a super PAC in order to get, Trump's team to endorse her. President Trump already expressed his loyalty to me after we lost the last election. And so and this actually happened last election as well. His team endorsed another gal named Tiffany Smiley in the race as well. And we blew her out of the water in the primary. And so, it's different now because the voters that were you sort of die hard to the incumbent, or maybe like, oh, we always vote for the incumbent. Now they have to actually make a decision. Who are they going to support?
And what are the top 2 or 3 issues that you would hope to affect in Congress? I know Congress is an interesting game, but if you're gonna dive in deeper on 2 or 3 issues, what would those be?
Number one is the economy. When I was a kid, my parents bought a home with 6 months' salary. When I was 22 years old, I bought my first home for 2 years' salary. And my kids who are now in their 20s are looking at 7 to 10 years salary in order to buy a home. That's not the American dream that I remember and that I know. And we have to fix that here in America. And there's ways to do it. It's challenging, but we certainly can do it. Um, Additionally, I think safety and security is a big deal. People in America don't feel as safe as what they once were. I remember when I was a kid sitting in front of the TV looking at, this suicide bomber bus in north of Beirut that was totally, burned up and many people died. We sort of live that's sort of come to America now, that sort of mentality, and these, little various terrorist attacks and all these different things that are happening in our own soil. And just the unrest, the leaders that don't want to follow law and order and don't believe in that. And they sort of, not sort of, they do literally encourage and incite a lot of the violence that we're seeing in America today, which is just incredibly heartbreaking, especially for somebody that served in the military to defend this country and everything it stands for, to see that happening. So I think safety and security is a big deal. And then regulation, supporting agriculture, water rights as it relates, regulation as it relates to agriculture. We have to be able to feed ourselves, and we've got to support these farms. And a lot of the farms are really struggling with lots of debt, massive expenses. The business models haven't changed in 20 years. A lot of the revenue there, let's give you an example. A bin of apples is a few hundred pounds of apples. The farmers are basically getting paid the same amount for that bin of apples that they were 20 years ago. But somehow the price in the store is like 6 or 8x what it was. Well, where's all that money going? Because it's certainly not going to the producer. Energy independence is huge. I did a documentary on the Klamath River Dam removal down in California and Oregon, which is available online for people to see. Those were four energy generating dams that they connived to remove, and they threatened to do the same thing on some of our 60 plus dams here in Washington state. We have a lot of water, a lot of rivers, a lot of power generating dams that also create transportation avenues. And so we need to protect those. And, obviously just with the coming AI and all this different stuff going on, talking about energy, we've got to really look at getting past this, green new scam, and, looking at more hydropower, more nuclear. There's nothing wrong with coal. There's nothing wrong with natural gas. I don't know why these things are demonized. Coal, for example, it used to be nasty to extract and it was unhealthy. Uh, and it burned dirty. But guess what? Now we have equipment, we have machines, we have enough coal to run this country for thousands of years, but we don't want to do it. In fact, here in Washington state, they just shut down our last coal-fired plant, which, just makes no sense. In today's world, we're not affecting anyone's health by doing it. The power generator engines that are using it now have exhaust scrubbers, so you don't have that stuff going into the atmosphere. And since when did natural gas become a demon? It was the one that was the hero 40 years ago, and now all of a sudden, they want to shut down the pipelines for that and reduce that. So, that's sort of a smattering of some of the things that are important to me. But this is America. Nothing is more important than the economy, and we have to remain strong on the international stage in order to maintain our sovereignty, obviously, and so, we have to get back to where we can articulate the American dream again.
And talking about the agricultural issues and the farmers not seeing the profit increase or the
Mhm.
return that manufacturers are, or that the seller distributor is.
Right.
So what does that look like? I feel like personally all of the infrastructure is built around feeding the globe. Like there's some notion that whatever system we have in place needs to be equipped to feed the globe. Whereas if we allowed communities to focus on feeding communities, wouldn't we be an entirely different economic spot?
Yeah, we would be, but trade is actually really good because there are things that other countries can do more efficient than we can, and they also have natural resources to build certain things that we aren't as able to build. I'm a manufacturing engineer. I believe we should do everything in America. I think we do it better. I think we take care of our employees. I think we do it faster. We're more efficient. We do everything cleaner. But there is reason, and this, for an example, China is the biggest producer of apples, but their apples are terrible. Washington State is the biggest producer of apples in the country, and they're very high quality apples. They're sought after throughout the world. I mean, we ship apples to Taiwan, which is like a stone's throw from China, because their apples suck and ours are great. And so there are reasons why, it does make sense for us to essentially grow or build in excess of what we actually need, because that offsets some of the trade deficit of things that we're buying from other countries. Because ultimately, even if it's not one for one with every country, ideally what we want to see is we want to see our exports be similar to our imports, and that creates a more stable economy here in America. So that's kind of my take on that. There's a lot more to it, but there is mutual benefit in having trade. But again, as a manufacturing engineer, I think we ought to be able to build anything we use here in America, and sort of have the option of being able to get it from other countries as well.
So how do you feel about the latest move to exit the World Health Organization? Some
Oh
people
my
think
gosh.
that we should stay apart and that we should play nice in the sandbox with the other global entities. And here at Stand for Health Freedom, we took over, I think, 700,000 actions to encourage exactly that, was the exit from this global overreach. So where do you stand on exiting the WHO and America's role in that?
Very, very happy with the exit of WHO, and it took a year. President Trump signed an executive order on his first day in office, and it took a year for that to come to play, just based on what our commitment was. I don't know why we would want to submit our health sovereignty to to a global organization. We have national sovereignty. We have our own personal sovereignty that is granted to us by God. And we certainly don't need, I think, the COVID debacle was sort of the test that should send people in the direction that they need to go, when they realize that the WHO wanted nothing to do with very simple things like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, or just, being healthy, like not having a lot of other, health issues that are going to cause you to be more easily prone to sickness. Um, and looking what the food pyramid, for example, the World Health Organization totally supports sort of globalized food that's all packaged and processed and shipped all over the world. And so I'm very happy about that. I think it's a very good move for America, and both from a health standpoint and from a financial standpoint, because there's no reason we need to be supporting organizations like that, or the WEF, or the UN, or any of the rest of them.
Yeah, and talking about the economy, I mean, obviously, we all agree that we all do better in a better economy. That's a
Yeah.
non-negotiable. But what is the federal government's role in the private market? I feel like so much of our GDP, so much of what we do is wrapped up in an outsized government. If it's not the government itself, it's government partnerships. It's the government supporting a specific industry or a specific manufacturer or solution
Mm.
within the free market. So
Yeah.
where do you stand on, the size of our central government and what should be
Yeah.
left to the free market?
Well, that's like a 30-minute conversation in and of itself. I wrote a book this last year called How We Broke America, and I highly recommend people get a copy of that. How We Broke America. And if you do get a copy, please write a review on Amazon, because that helps other people to know what the book is about. But our government, we have, let's go back to the fundamentals, and I'll try to just do a quick summary here. But the 10th Amendment is very clear that the federal government is to be limited to what is written in the Constitution. And this is challenging for everyone to get their arms around, because we have this cool thing that's not so cool for America called the 16th Amendment. And that's where the government was able to start taxing us directly, and basically pulling money out of our paycheck. I personally think the flow of money should come from the states to fund the federal government. And the federal government only gets funding for the things that are articulated in the Constitution. Now, that is a huge statement that all kinds of people would love to just take me out for even saying. Because our federal government has become so gargantuan, we have an entire apparatus around this thing, like millions of people around Washington, D.C., that are funded by this. And we think that term limits is going to solve the problem when you just switch out the actor. If you don't, yeah, well, I won't go down that path, but there are millions of people who don't have any term limits. They are literally paid by the federal government to do the work that they do, and it oftentimes isn't in the best interest of the American population. And so we need to decentralize. We need to decentralize out of Washington, D.C., back to the states. That's the constitution of, or the constitutionality of, the whole dual federalist system. And we need to give states power and authority. Now, I live in a crazy state. That would be terrible for us. It would probably be worse than it is now. But that's still the way the system is supposed to be designed. The states are supposed to have autonomy to operate how they want. State legislatures are supposed to look at other state legislatures' actions to see what's working and then bring those laws or different things into their state so that they can be like these other great states. It's like your favorite sandwich shop or pizza place. Maybe there's if you live in a big city, there might be 50 different ones around town. Well, one of them's going to have the best sandwiches or the best pizza. All the other ones should be going there or sending their staff there to say, "Hey, what are they doing? What's their customer service like? What's their food quality? What's their pricing?" That's what we ought to be doing as states and competing with each other in this sort of entrepreneurial spirit to make the best states. But we have this just onerous, federal government that is makes it almost impossible for that to even happen. The most powerful people in the land are actually supposed to be the governors and the state legislatures.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fundamental value for health freedom because decentralization is absolutely necessary to serve the health and welfare of the people. We cannot possibly meet the health and welfare needs of individual people with a centralized authority, especially not a global authority. So
100%.
where
Yeah.
do you see health freedom as a foundational American value? Like who should be able to dictate how you care for your human frame?
Well, I'm a believer in the way it was, 30, 40 years ago. You went into your doctor's office if you choose to, and you have a conversation with your doctor and you mutually agree on a best path forward. To me, the doctors are our advocates. They have the experience and the knowledge to be able to guide us. Unfortunately, a lot of the doctors today are taught symptom prescription.
Mhm.
And AI can replace that very easily. But the really good doctors are the ones that really dive into, all right, what is your unique circumstance? What's your lifestyle like? What is your diet like? What is your what is your desire to live a free, healthy life and be able to choose that? And if you know what, if you don't want to go to the doctor and you want to do it on your own, you ought to be able to have the freedom to be able to do that. And so that's kind of my take on that. Uh, I think that our health freedom is a natural right. It's a sovereignty. It's part of our sovereignty that is gifted and granted to us by God.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because talking about Washington as a state and how it fares with constitutional liberties, you might not be extremely happy where they are right now, but still resolved in the decentralization as the people's sharpest tool. And we're seeing a lot of people on both sides of this who are wanting for the quick fix to centralize authority, which we do not support at Stand for Health Freedom. But then there's people on the other side who also are very upset that options are emerging because they think that access to the default option will decrease. And the truth of the matter is that the doctor does play a role in the prescription and care and treatment medically, and that we shouldn't be able to just go to a pharmacist and say, I, patient, demand A, B, and C treatment regardless of a medical opinion. I mean, that's just recklessness when it comes to medical treatment. And so there's so much there, but I'm glad to hear that you have a vision for the natural rights of a sovereign human.
Yeah, and I also think that we ought to expand the conversation to not just thinking of symptom prescription. It's a symptom. Let's look at causation. Let's look at lifestyle. Let's look at diet. Let's look at the whole person. Let's look at history, DNA, sort of Gary Breckus kind of style. Like what else can we do besides a prescription? I'm not against prescriptions at all. They have their place. They can be very useful. But I think we ought to be looking at the whole person. I think that's one of the drawbacks that many Americans have fallen into, and part of the reason why we are so unhealthy. It's not just because of our diet, it's also because we think we can do whatever we want and then we just take a pill and it makes it okay. And I just don't think that's a wise way of treating the body that God has given you.
There's not a lot of stewardship in that, as we like to say,
Yeah.
where is the
Good.
stewardship? And
Yeah.
so thank you so much for sharing about your race with us. And I would love to hear where can people follow your campaign and support your fight for freedom for Washington, but in US Congress.
Yeah, thank you. So you can buy my book on Amazon, How We Broke America. You can also follow me on Twitter at Sessler, Sessler. And you can look on YouTube for some of my documentaries. I did a documentary on the Panama Canal, another one on the Klamath River dams that I mentioned. I'm on Facebook as well. I honestly don't really like social media all that much, but I know that's kind of how people communicate. But I'm the one that I am on the most is Twitter, and even though I'm still shadow banned on there, even though Elon owns it, but happy to converse with people on there, and happy to answer questions about this stuff as well. And I appreciate the support for my campaign because we absolutely need it. You know, my wife and I have poured our life savings the last 5 years and been without an income, just fighting for America, traveling all over the place, doing all kinds of stuff. And we're fighting against the machine here, the establishment, money, and every dollar donated is incredibly helpful. So we very much appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, Stand for Health Freedom is proud to endorse Jared Sessler and his campaign to lead Washington's 4th congressional district because you understand what America was built upon, the freedom, the personal responsibility, and that health is a huge part of that. So you can find resources on pesticide liability shields, vaccine mandates, and more on our website under the Battles Ahead page. So visit standforhealthfreedom.com and grab your voter guide while you are there because the 2026 elections are going to be huge for health freedom. Thank you so much, Jared.
Yeah, thank you, Leah.